Hello, welcome to Face to Face. I'm your host Adam Jasser. We have a special guest today, Leszek Jażdżewski, editor-in-chief of Liberte magazine. Leszek, welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you on the show again. So, a lot on our plate to sum up for this week, but we are lucky because we will be talking about an event that happens once in a generation. There's a new pope, white smoke. And, right, so a good topic, right?
I must say that I envy those who selected Pope in just 3 days, because after following the presidential Polish elections for 6 months, 3 days seems like a great time to select ahead of Catholic Church.
Look, we will be talking about the Polish presidential election, but let's stay with the Pope, okay? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Yes. So, you know, a U.S. Cardinal, Robert Prevost, who assumed the name of Leo XIV. So, typical question, is he a liberal or is he a conservative?
Well, I think that it might be quite deeper, I think, in some ways, who he might occur to be. So, first of all, being American, it seems Catholic Church decided to fight for the soul of United States of America.
Ah, so politics.
I do believe that it was a really case, a soul and maybe the money as well, because the Catholic Church in the US is really influential. And the new Pope, Leo XIV, I think it was very telling that he selected the name, well, I would say after the Leo XIII, who was I think the longest ruling pope in the history, but also the oath of Rerum Novarum, which was extremely progressive for the Catholic Church at the time. So I think that especially regarding the social issues, the working class issues that were actually very essential in the United States, why they selected Donald Trump. I think there might be very similar issues that new pope were trying to address, but perhaps from a very different angle.
And that different angle is, of course, his probably slightly different attitude to migration, to minority rights and things like that. It was interesting that Donald Trump, who, as we saw from his social media, apparently dreamed about becoming Pope himself, right? For a moment.
I must say that it was a very interesting way of addressing the issue of conclave at the time, but Donald Trump seems to have immense capacity for provoke and for engage with.
But apart from this joke, he I would say he tried to take credit for it, but actually what he said was quite elegant for him about the new Pope. However, not everybody in his MAGA movement was pleased. Steve Bannon, the MAGA ideologue, popular in America, but also popular in Poland, he said, you know, that's bad for Christians in MAGA movement because he's too progressive.
Right. I think what I really like was the comment by John Favreau, who said that the Pope from America who is fighting with J.D. Vance on Twitter, I'm fully in. Because really, at the time, the Cardinal of Boston was sort of commenting or opposing the anti-immigration stance of Vice President of the United States. Of course, I doubt that Pope will engage in such issues anymore, but by the simple fact that he was in Peru for such a long time, who was a missionary, I cannot imagine that he would support the very isolationist,
yes.
Thank you, and nationalist stance of United States. And obviously, Catholic Church is universal, so by definition, the Pope will have to oppose the new U.S. administration on those issues.
Right, and that would be a continuity with Pope Francis, obviously. But there is also a Polish connection here. The new Pope met the late Polish pontiff, John Paul, who, of course, in Poland is, as you know, the Pope. The Pope. So this is the first American Pope, North American Pope, and John Paul was the first Eastern European Pope, if you will, and there was huge surprise when he was elected. And this was at the time, you know, 1986, when they met, and these were the years that this region was still under Soviet domination. And then America, under Ronald Reagan, and the Church, under the Polish Pope, work together to bring freedom, religious and political, to this region. And then it happened. So are we going to see a new Polish-American alliance on some of these issues?
Well, I think by the fact that he has a Chicago connection as well. This is
well, here you go.
another Polish, biggest Polish diaspora outside, well, anywhere in the world, actually. So, yes, I think for many Poles, the fact that American was selected as a pope was a very sort of welcoming idea. I don't know if there is any special connection with John Paul II, except the fact that they met when the current pope was very young. But I think what was the main issue with Pope Francis, late Pope Francis, from the Eastern European perspective, it was this fact that he was quite anti-American, at the same time quite Russian understanding, I would put it this way. I think it would be extremely surprising if the new Pope would follow the Francis on those particular issues. He might be very open, he might be for the working class, he might be for the poor, he might be open to the global south, but I very doubt that he would be trying to accommodate Russia in any sort of way. And I think that the fact that he is American from Polish perspective means that he would be for freedom, for Western alliance, for things that actually we stand up for.
For Christianity.
Well, for Christianity in that sort of traditional sense.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that because, you know, Pope Francis was the progressive hope, if you will, of the church, and also many lay people liked his messaging. But on the conflict in Ukraine, he seemed to be out of depth. I don't know if you can say that about the Pope, but you know, praising Russia as a great empire, praising Catherine the Great, you know, in this region in particular, that didn't win him many friends.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think that Francis really represented the perspective of many countries which saw and still see the main threats from the imperialist politics of US and has traditional ties with Russia. And I think he represented this point of view, which obviously could not be met with any sort of understanding here. So I do believe that the new Pope would be free of such prejudice, if we might use these words. But at the same time, I'm very curious how political would be this Pope be. Because it's, you know, you mentioned that Francis was very popular also among atheists, but it's a question whether it is really the role of the Pope, whether he will try to be a uniter, whether he will try to, well, sort of renew the Catholic Church, so maybe finish some of the reforms that Francis did. And I think this is a very interesting question because we don't have a very obvious answer to that.
Well, we might hear about that on Sunday when he has his first mass and will deliver a sermon. So the other issue which I wanted to ask you about is the Polish Church, the Polish Catholic Church, has over the years become very conservative and also quite politically engaged. And they didn't see eye to eye. Most of the bishops and cardinals didn't see eye to eye with Francis on social issues, on this openness of the church, of the message of tolerance, and some of this messaging. He wasn't very popular, let's say, in some circles, church circles in Poland. So now with this new Pope, how do you expect this relationship between the Polish official church and the Vatican to develop?
You know, I don't really think that Polish church has the capacity to reform or to become more progressive or even, I would say, universal, which is surprising because it's still Catholic Church. It's a Christian, well, it's a Christian denomination, but it's a very nationalistic. And I think the problem with Catholic Church is that I think for many Catholics it was sort of natural, in Polish Catholics, that there was a Polish head of church. And when John Paul II died, I think many problems emerged. So he was such a strong leader in many aspects, not just spiritual leader, but also in some ways political.
Father figure.
Yes, he was a father figure, not just for Catholics.
For the nation.
Yes, and I think many problems of Catholic Church managed to grow because he was there and he dominated to such an extent that these issues didn't have to be resolved. And, you know, to be honest, I think that in many ways it would be easier because we wouldn't have this, I think, extremely, you know, pro-LGBT, I mean, extremely for Catholic Church. But I mean, I don't expect that would be necessarily on those issues such a continuation, because I think it was sort of divisive for the Catholic Church also outside Poland, in general and in the world. But I also don't think that Universal Church led by Leo XIV, they can actually manage to remain as they are. I think they will have to try to go, if not ahead of the times, at least trying to follow the times. And
The Polish bishops, you mean?
the Universal Church.
Universal
Polish,
Church,
and I think Polish bishops will be much closer to Donald Trump. So if we have a new Pope versus Donald Trump, I do believe that this nationalist vision, the closed vision of society, is much closer to Catholic Church.
Right. Well, we'll stay in Poland because you mentioned the presidential election. And I remember when you were sitting here and you said it's going to be a very close close race. But this week might have changed things because the runner-up, the front-runner is still Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, but the runner-up, Mr. Karol Nawrocki of the opposition Law and Justice, he hit a snag. His campaign hit a snag. He's accused of swindling an ailing pensioner out of a flat. So Polish journalists love the word game changer. So was it a game changer or was it just a small bump in the road?
Well, a small bump in the road just before the elections take place. It's a big gap, and I think it was. I don't know if it's a game changer, but I think after having a photo opportunity with Donald Trump, even if it lasted 2 minutes, Nawrocki immediately went into this deep problem, which I think dominated for at least a week.
And
Polish
still playing.
Yes, and I think it's still running. So we have the last week of campaigning before the first round, and I think he wouldn't get out of it. So obviously he can still mobilize his supporters, but I think he cannot express his own narrative. He cannot fight Trzaskowski. He has to fight with himself. He had to fight for himself.
So he's on the defensive now, right?
He's so much on the defensive. And it was, I think, I would say it was sort of unpredictable that such issues would actually emerge.
Well, there were some issues because if you remember, there was a time when he was selected by the party to be their candidate. This was months back. Apparently the party, Law and Justice, they commissioned a report on him from some, I can't recall who was doing the report, but the report indicated that there may be some issues when it comes to his character and integrity. And the Law and Justice leader, Jarosław Kaczyński, brushed these aside and said, yes, this is our man.
Yes, that's quite true. And I think all those issues sort of emerged after he was selected, but they didn't stick. I mean, all those accusations didn't really seem to matter. What I think was different this time is that obviously it seemed the candidates lied several times, either now or in the past. He couldn't be consistent with his chief of staff, with the Law and Justice Party, which is supporting him.
So different narratives, contradicting narratives.
Absolutely, and also the issue of exploiting the elderly man, perhaps with some alcoholic issues. It is something that many Poles, I think, can sort of sympathize with. A lot of people heard about someone like this. They have someone like this in the family. It's not even a question whether he broke the law. It's a question of moral integrity. And it's a question, would you trust such a person? And this is a very personal election. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So it's a very personal choice that people are making. And this is really the electorate of Law and Justice. There are people who might be threatened by people like Nawrocki taking over their property.
So last time you said, when I asked you to make a bet, right? Who's going to, because the first round is next weekend. And then the second round is 2 weeks later, so 1st of June. So last time I asked you, so in the end, who is going to win? And you said, I think Mr. Trzaskowski, but it is not going to be an easy victory. So has this changed now?
Well, I don't think that there is any indication that Trzaskowski is going to lose. But, it's still like, okay, even if you believe it might be not as close, the first round, it's really sort of like a restart of the campaign in some ways. And obviously
a reset, right?
So it's a sort of a reset. Obviously, it's very much depending on how the gap between the candidates will emerge. If it's a Trzaskowski 10% in the lead, it will be very hard, I think, to turn it around for Nawrocki. But if it's close, and we don't really know what's going to be the turnout. We don't know what would be the support of the minor candidates of the smaller coalition parties.
And we also don't know how accurate the opinion polls are, and they have been wrong across the globe.
Yes, that's true. And also the polarization. So you ask if it's a game changer. In many ways, it seems that sometimes, I think it's not the case now, but even if you look at the US elections, you see that sometimes the accusations are
working the other way
side,
around.
Are mobilizing the other side. I don't think it might be the case this time, but it is still possible that this electorate supporting Law and Justice candidate will go out and vote, while electorate of the other side might be hesitant because of different issues, like candidate going too far to the right, or believing that he's going to win anyway. So I wouldn't say it's. I think it's a safe bet to. It's sort of
a safer bet.
It's a safer bet to say that Trzaskowski is going to win, but he's definitely not on a highway to victory.
So you stick to your previous interpretation, not on a highway to victory.
Well, we're going to see first of June.
And we also know the famous saying of a British Prime Minister, I think it was Harold Wilson, who said, a week is a long time in politics.
Yes, and 3 weeks even more.
And 3 weeks even more. Okay, well, if Mr. Trzaskowski wins, then this is, of course, going to be a setback for the MAGA movement, with which Mr. Nawrocki identifies in Law and Justice. As we remember, they cheered Donald Trump's election in Polish parliament, standing ovation. But in Romania, it seems things are going in the opposite direction. A candidate who is aligned with the MAGA movement, who is a sympathizer and enthusiast of the MAGA movement in the United States, Mr. Simeon, is leading with 40% support after the first round. And now, at the same time as the first round in Poland is taking place, the second round in Romania will take place. So he's likely to emerge a winner. So in general, it seems that in Europe, these MAGA movements, they're doing well. And then we saw Mr. Merz, the new German chancellor, almost failing to become chancellor in a vote in Bundestag. So my question to you is, what is happening to the pro-European center, and what role the MAGA movement is playing in all this?
Right, I don't think that MAGA had too much to do with the fact that Merz didn't have a support in the first round of voting in. It was his own party or coalition partner, not AfD. AfD obviously voted against him anyway.
The MAGA party.
Yeah, the MAGA party, so to speak. But in terms of Romania, I think it's a very interesting case. And the fact that the previous elections were cancelled in a way, or repeated, and the candidate was prevented from running again.
Mr. Jażdżewski.
Yes. So I think, well, it's obvious that Simeon sort of took over his support, but also managed to get the support of those who thought that it was, well, basically a legal move, or without a proper legal grounds. So you see the threats where sort of mainstream parties, they overreact. It might actually, because they wanted to prevent Jażdżewski from becoming a president. But by doing this without, I would say, constitutional safe grounds, they supported another anti-mainstream, Western alliance.
Yes. Well, basically, Western alliance, not necessarily. He has moderated some of the messages.
Well, so he might be at the same time pro-NATO and pro-Putin. And
no, he's not pro-Putin.
Well,
he's not pro-Putin.
He's
anti-EU.
He's not. He's anti-EU, and he's also Ukrainian skeptic. So, in this case, obviously, being Romanian, he cannot be too pro-Putin. But in effect, not supporting Ukraine, it means that Russia interests advance. So I think overreaction of the mainstream parties can bring the MAGA parties closer to victory.
Leszek, thank you very much. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, please watch TVP because we will be covering both of these elections in detail during the next weekend. And for now, this is all in Face to Face. Thank you for watching and see you next week.